From a major shift in DC's plans for its darkest superhero team to Jason Statham's hive of vengeance reactivating and a rising film industry in Ghana courting its audience, we are covering the global stories that you need to know today. Welcome to the Film Mandate, and in today's episode, James Gunn has provided an update on the state of the film, the authority, with its possible pivoting. And Jason Statham's the Beekeeper 2 has begun shooting with Yara Shahidi of Blackish and Goldish fame joining the ensemble cast. And veteran actor Van Vicker has expressed hope in Ghana's film industry being on the cusp of the spectrum of revival. I'll be covering all these stories and more right here on the Film Mandate. My name is Papa Otu. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Film Mandate, where I bring to you movie news, reviews, and reactions, both from the African front and the international scene. And thanks for joining me for this episode right here on the Film Mandate on this very Monday. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Well, we'll be delving into the very first story, and the first story begins with an interesting update from James Gunn himself. And for this past few weeks, we have all been enjoying, the Peacemaker, which is, ramping up steam with a lot of people expressing how fun it is, even comparing it to be even much edgier and fun compared to the first one. Well, with, earlier on in this year, James Gunn taking over the reins of DC made an announcement of beginning the very first phase of the DC universe, which has been rebooted in a soft reboot. And he did state that the first phase is Gods and Monsters, and among a number of productions that he mentioned was The Authority, which is supposed to follow after a number of the projects that has already been released currently to date. And well, he just recently he was interviewed by Deadline, and in Deadline he did provide an update as to the state of this particular project at the moment. And with this, I thought we would delve into it and just take a brief look as to what is actually the state of the production that he is that most people are anticipating. So in the Deadline website says that James Gunn teases some Peacemaker characters will continue in another DC series. It's not exactly Peacemaker 3. New update on The Authority. So this is a screenshot of the episode 6 of the Peacemaker. And this is what he had to say. Let me just jump straight to the portion that covers the story we want to talk about for this purpose. We also asked Gunn for an update on the Authority movie. At a DC press conference back in February, he mentioned that the Anti-Heroes IP was the hardest one to crack, given how other DC projects, including Superman, stepped on Authority's toes. It's the one that got messed with through all of the other things that were happening. The script had a harder time coming along, Gunn told the room at the time. Gunn tells Deadline that the Authority is not kaput. There's someone who's a really good creator who talked to me the other day. He said, so that means series, right? Who knows? Answered Gunn. I'm probably not going to do certain movies with characters who audiences don't know. It's harder to get people in the theater for that kind of thing. So the Authority was created after Stormwatch, a planetary defense force against aliens, was destroyed. The former member of that group, Jenny Sparks, created the Authority with her Stormwatch Black teammates Swift and Jack Hawksmoor. The team includes the engineer Angela Spiker and Jerome Thorndike, the latest Doctor, Apollo and Midnighter. They are known as a group of anti-heroes who take matters into their own hands, despite what the world's governments advise. So that is the new update we have on the Authority. And I must say that James Gunn is really following through with his promise on making sure that no project moves forward until the script is actually good and meets his expectation that fits within the universe of a world, of a superhero world that he's trying to build. And I must commend him on that because I guess what they are trying to do, what he's trying to do in particular, haven't been in both worlds. When I mean both worlds, being in the former DCEU and also being in MCU, I'm sure he's learned his lessons from both sides and preferably would want to make sure that the script is actually well written before it is churned out or turned into a movie. And I do indeed admire his tenacity to ensure that that is done. Because as the boss of a studio, obviously, at one point or the other, because you are also reporting to not just the authority, the highest authority of the company, but you also have to, make sure that um, shareholders of the company are satisfied. It does put a lot of pressure on them, but I think what he seeks to do is to ensure that that does not become the case where you turn out a movie and then it doesn't receive the best of box office performance. And I guess that is what he's bent on doing. And as you can see, for those who watched his update about 7 months ago, we are talking about somewhere February, when he took over the reins of DC, now DCU, he did state that he was releasing a number of films. And so far, I think we've received, the Creature Commandos. We've also had the opportunity to watch, I think, what's it called? We've also received Superman, and I think now we have Peacemaker 2. Obviously, we are supposed to get, they were supposed to be Brave and the Bold and other, films in the mix, but we are supposed to be receiving possibly soon, I think, either get into next year, Green Lanterns. But after Green Lanterns would have been the Authority, which now, looking at the state of the script as he's describing, it's been a hard thing to crack. Looking at the fact that they were not bent on just releasing it because they've laid out the timeline for all these films. But his focus is to ensure that things get done right. And I think I can understand how that is. And also coupled with the fact that there's a lot of moving parts that for us as film pundits and audience, we may not be privy to, except for scoopers who have inside knowledge of what is happening in DC currently. So for those who do not have much information, we can only surmise that there's a lot of moving parts that is making perhaps the first blueprint of the DCU evolving with time. So as he even stated in the article, he said that there are a number of characters he might not be able to introduce or use now. I'm sure as a result of the fact that the possibility of the Authority moving from film to series is very high. He didn't categorically state that he's turning the Authority movie into a series, but from the statement he made, it infers, or it likely infers, that that would be the case. Perhaps give the Authority time to breathe and then for people to get to know them intimately before they are introduced onto the silver screen. But I must admit that given what he was able to do with Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't know about those of you listening to me right now who may have known the origins of these characters prior to watching the films. Majority of film fans had no idea who the Guardians of the Galaxy were, except for those who are privy to the comic book, iterations of those characters. But how, one way or the other, he made them work, and they became one of the beloved of the MC universe. But I can understand because he is in a very unique position where he can't just helm every other project except for focusing on the anchor of the entire universe. By saying anchor, I'm using it loosely, not in terms of what Marvel has as an anchor character. No, I'm just using it loosely. So with Superman, his focus is on Superman, who seems to be the focal point of the entire DCU, and then building the rest of the universe around him. So that is his focus. I believe that if he had more leeway and he could have enough time to put some of the pieces together, I'm very certain he would have taken upon the helm of the what's it called, the authority, and work with that. And he's quite an expert in bringing perhaps obscure characters that people may not know of, or people may see it to be quite goofy, and still make them work, give them some emotional depth, some character arc that audiences would fall in love with. But currently, as it stands, that is not the case, and I think what he's trying to do is to make sure that whoever comes to helm this property is able to give the best pitch possible that would work well within the entirety of the universe, and perhaps particularly the phase they are creating. Because in as much as he did say that it doesn't necessarily have to connect, audiences also expect that there will be some form of connection one way or the other. You are building a universe, and once you are building a universe, whatever happens in one aspect of the world affects the other on the other end. Yes, it may be such a way that you may choose not to go with the continuity, but one way or the other, if you wanted to work and compete, keenly with what the MCU is doing, there needs to be, then it has to be written, the stories have to be written in such a way that it weaves perfectly well into the universe. And already, I think we've seen a player or two within the universe already, and that is the engineer. And I think that is played by Gabriella, if I'm not mistaken. That is played by Gabriella in The Peacemaker. So she was actually in the. Let me see if I can get the name right. Yeah. So she's already. Is it Gabriella? I'm trying to come up with the name, but it looks like I can't find it anywhere. Yeah, but so in the Superman movie, you already have the engineer in the film who also happens to be in the authority. So at least we have a glimpse of what the makeup of the authority will be like, from what we've seen in the Peacemaker season 2. I think a couple of the episodes, but more so in terms of the use of her powers and ability in the Superman film. So it is very likely that James Gunn would have wanted to, sort of put a character or two in other movies going forward. But looking at how things are changing and evolving, that may not be the case. But I'm glad that he's confident that a good creator, a really good creator, per his own words, has pitched an idea that he likes, but may not necessarily be for the silver screen, but rather for the small screen. So I think the idea of it being flexible and adaptable is great, so that they don't pigeonhole themselves into a state that will result in what perhaps ended up being the old DCEU. And notably, some of the films were really good, but unfortunately, it wasn't really received well by audiences across board. And you're also looking at making sure that you make enough money to be able to continue the films to be produced. So it is understandable that the old DCEU had to end for the new DCU had to continue in whichever form based on what the executives at the time saw was happening. However, I think that it being adaptable, being flexible and adaptable, also presents its own challenges. And some of the challenges being that majority who may actually watch on the silver screen, on the small screen like Peacemaker, may not necessarily follow through to watch what is on the film, on the big screen, and vice versa. So that would have to be done such a way that whatever is put in one is able to compel others to want to go to the big screen to watch, or perhaps wait long enough that when it ends up on the HBO Max streaming platform, they would be enthused enough to want to watch it. So it is, I can understand the kind of complex situation he finds himself in, because some audiences, after they are done watching, they may not necessarily go to the cinemas to watch it. So it presents quite a challenge, and they have to adapt a strategy that would indeed, compel people to watch it on both, screens. And one of the challenges now, or one of the things that I'm sure he's doing now that most people raved about, I haven't watched that episode myself to confirm whether it resonates with me in the same way it does with others. Is the episode 6 of season 2, where we had Lex Luthor show up in the scene in that particular episode. So going forward, they have sort of, or he has sort of worked this one or linked it together with what the the Superman sequel, the Man of Tomorrow sequel, is likely, Man of Tomorrow, the sequel to Superman, is likely to be like. So there's a lot of moving parts, but I believe very much that he knows, he has a plan in mind, and they are trying to sort it out to make it work for the good of all that they have to do. So let me know what you think with regards to this particular development with James Gunn providing an update on the state of the authority. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. So moving on with our first story, well, we come to a segment that I've titled the Oscar Minute. Since the Oscar is just around the corner, it looks like so many nations already are making presentations of what would be their best entry into the best international feature for the 97th Oscar come 2026. Well, Lebanon this time around has presented their pick for the Oscars. I think they did so on Friday, if I'm not mistaken. And this is what they had to say. Oscars, Lebanon selects A Sad and Beautiful World for Best International Feature Film category. It says that Lebanon has entered Cyril Aris' romantic drama A Sad and Beautiful World as its candidate for Best International Feature Film in the 98th Academy Awards. So pardon me, I said 97, 98. Pardon me for that. So that is what they have presented here. So it says that the feature world premiered in Venice, parallel section Giornate degli Autori, previously known as Venice Days, in September, where it won the audience voted People's Choice Award. The Beirut set drama stars Hassan Akil and Monia Akil as childhood sweethearts Nino and Yasmina, who lose sight of one another to reunite in their 20s, with their relationship developing in step with Lebanon's tumultuous history. The film marked a return to the big screen for Akil, who has focused on directing in recent years, with credits including Costa Brava, Lebanon, as well as Boiling Point, The Responder, and the upcoming dynasty drama House of Guinness. Akil was previously seen in Memory Box, while other cast members include Julia Kasar, Camille Salame, Tino Rakaram, and Nadine Chalhoub. A Sad Beautiful World is Aris's first fiction feature after documentaries The Swing 2018, which premiered at Karlovy Vary, and Dancing on the Edge of a Volcano 2023, which won a special jury mention at Karlovy Vary and screened at BFI London, and over 80 festivals worldwide. The film is produced by Georges pardon me, I'm just butchering the name. Let me just leave it at that. So that is indeed an interesting pick for this filmmaker. And indeed, I'm happy that that is happening, because it looks like all the nations are ramping up with a lot of interesting feature films, presenting it for the best international feature, for of the Oscars come next year. So this wraps up the Oscar minutes for today's episode. Tomorrow I'll come your way with another country, and that is China, presenting its feature film for the best international feature. So thanks, and let me know your thoughts with regard to the segment. Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comments section below. So moving on to our very second story, Jason Statham's The Beekeeper, released just a couple of years ago, and it was quite a wonderful film which starred also Jeremy Irons and Felicia Rashford, and it gave us quite a spectacular performance from the action star Statham himself. And indeed, it went on from a $40 million budget. It went on to make $160 million, quadrupling its budget, and that is quite an interesting win for Miramax, if I'm not mistaken, the studio that produced the film. And obviously, because of its box office success and also the critical reviews by audiences and critics alike, the Beekeeper 2 was going to be definitely put into full gear. And as we are speaking now, it has begun production. And not only that, but Yara Shahidi, the blackish star, Yara Shahidi, yeah, the blackish star, has actually joined the cast, the ensemble cast for this particular production. And so let's just take a brief read of the story detailing the production for the Beekeeper 2. And this is actually captured in the screen rant. And this is what the article says that, sorry, pardon me. Yeah, so this is what the article says. Jason Statham's Beekeeper 2 begins filming. And Jason Statham's highly anticipated sequel, The Beekeeper 2, has reportedly begun production. David Ayer's 2024 hit The Beekeeper follows seemingly humble beekeeper Adam Clay Statham, who is revealed to be former operative from the mysterious organization known as the Beekeepers, and sets out on a mission of revenge when tragedy strikes his friend and employee. Following the Beekeeper's mysterious ending, a sequel was announced in February 2025. The Beekeeper bears many similarities to John Wick, which went on to become a successful franchise after its effectively standalone first outing. So it makes sense that this story would continue. The Beekeeper 2 also recently announced Yara Shahidi would be joining the cast. Now, director Timo Janto, who just released Nobody 2, shared an image via Instagram that serves as an announcement that The Beekeeper 2 has begun production. This puts the movie on track for its rumored 2026 release, though this will be later in the year. So that is Timo Bros' his Instagram handle, and the clapperboard indicating that they have begun production on The Beekeeper 2. And that is indeed quite an exciting news to hear that The Beekeeper 2 has begun production. And it is indeed exciting seeing how particularly the John Wick films are sort of are sort of inspired other production houses and filmmakers to embark on a similar kind of films. And, Timo, who also happened to direct Nobody 2, which loosely exists within the 87 North, John Wick universe, he directed that film as well. So obviously, with his take on action movies, it's of no surprise that he's been asked to helm this. However, I think he did direct a couple of films in his home country, I think in Indonesia, to rousing success, and therefore has been tapped to do this production as well. And with a new cast of Yara Shahidi. I don't know whether, she would be a victim to perhaps one of these mafia organizations or criminal organizations within the world of the beekeeper. If you remember, the first one had Felicia Rashad, who happens to be a neighbor of his, of Jason Statham, and I think all her savings or accounts from her dead husband or so was hacked and was taken. And as a result of that, Jason Statham had to embark on a journey of hunting down all those who, you know, um, did that. I think I've forgotten the entire story, but from that time on, you realize that this man is not to be joked with. Just as you see him play in most of the films he does, but in this, he doubles down so hard. And seeing David Ayer helming this particular production, you know it was going to be dark. David Ayer he's done a couple of films that are really dark, and you can tell how exceptional of a director he is when he actually helms a movie. So obviously, the the dead success definitely will come a part two, and it looks good already, seeing that they've started shooting barely a year after its release in 2024. So indeed, it does speak well of how successful the franchise was, both in box office returns, just as I've said or mentioned earlier on, it quadrupled its budget, and also critically, a lot of people enjoyed it, leading to into this particular one. And I believe that the success of Nobody 2, though modestly, but critically very enjoyable by audiences and filmmakers, I mean, audiences and critics alike, indeed endears Timo as perhaps a director to watch out for when it comes to action films. So obviously, with him joining this particular project, there's a lot to look out for and what it would mean when it's finally done. There's also going to be Jeremy Irons returning back, as well as Westworld, and Kurt Raymer returned also to pen this particular production, which gives us much hope, seeing that not all the team of the first one dropped out. David Ayer wasn't part of is not part of this one, but at least the scribe for the first one has returned to ensure that perhaps the story is very consistent with the first one. So that is quite exciting, and seeing that there is the possibility that John Wick is coming to an end soon. I don't know whether the ballerina movie would take place of John Wick when he finally ends his turn in the John Wick 5. This could be a possible replacement. I mean, in the scope, in the taste of cinema-going audiences of film fans, this could possibly be a befitting replacement for that particular franchise. However, I think there's still going to be other spin-offs in the John Wick franchise. So regardless, it will still face some competition of a sort when those ones are also released. But whatever that may be, we know Jason Statham's films always delivers on his action and also the promises it always makes in the film. So I think it is a good thing that they are doing too, and hopefully it should come sooner in the year than later. But obviously, seeing that they are shooting now and given that post production could take quite a long time, it may come in the third or fourth quarter of next year. So let me know what you think with regards to the Beekeeper 2 being shot and the addition of Yara Shahidi of Blackish fame. Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section below. And moving on from the world of, the international news of all that is happening, well, we come back to my home country, Ghana, and one of Ghana's veteran actors who has been in the industry for as long as I can remember, was interviewed about 2 weeks ago on TV3, and he did make some, statements. Obviously, because he's in the industry, he sees things from a perspective that the ordinary individual may not see. but he expressed hope as to the possibility of Ghana's film industry being on a revival spectrum. So, yes, he's seeing the signs that the Ghana industry is actually, climbing back up from the downturn or the nosedive that we found ourselves in. And if you do watch the interview on YouTube, it did state the fact that there's a lot of jobs in the system compared to a time when it looks like at a point in time everything sort of came to a standstill to a point. And I think, yes, that indeed is the case. And I think it is quite good to have the industry sort of coming, finding its way back up. But I think we, the industry or the stakeholders in the industry as a whole, need to find a way of capitalizing on these resurgence or on this revival. And why do I say that? Because we've had other times when the industry always, go down and comes back up. And yeah, that is also, I mean, it is common with every industry. But how far down do we go, and how far up do we climb, and yet we are not able to sustain it on a level? And that is something that I think we need to pay a critical look at, because the challenge of our industry has always, I would always say that because of the lack of data, we are not able to pinpoint and learn from the lessons that perhaps caused the industry to go down in certain point. Yes, I know from just a standpoint or overview of the industry, yes, you can be able to name a thing or two that might have caused the industry to dip. But regardless of that, there ought to be a properly collated data that shows the indicators that caused it to dip, and also the other indicators that perhaps helped it to climb up. And if we're able to do that, that would help us avoid the same pitfalls that caused the industry to dip at certain point in times. Yes, with every industry, regardless, there's going to be times when no matter how well you plan, no matter how well you orchestrate all the factors to make sure it is conducive enough, there will be times when things will not really go well. I mean, the world over, the film industry is facing its own problems in terms of lower box office returns, as a lot of people have not really, or a section of the cinema going audience have not still returned to the cinemas. But when it comes to our issue in particular with Ghana, it is quite a different scenario altogether, in the sense that we don't even have enough cinemas such that when a movie is released into the theaters, it could stay there for a longer theatrical window, something like 1 month. In Ghana, if your film is able to even last in the cinemas for a month, then for some reason, I don't know whether I could say because it's that good or people like their films, but barely or rarely do you have films stay that long in the cinemas. I'm talking about local films. For some reason, foreign films are able to last longer. And those are things that we need to critically ask ourselves. In the interview, Van Vicker did state that we should love our own. And yes, I agree with that. That is what we are supposed to do. We should patronize our own. But I also remember that James Gunn, the executive secretary, did say something. I think I covered it in one of the episodes last week, that a lot of producers took for granted the audience. And by so doing, a lot have lost interest in our own local productions. And well, there seems to be a new wave of films that is whipping up back the appetite of people to go back into cinemas, and that is great. But the question would have to be, how consistent can we be, not just from individual filmmakers, but the, when we have inadequate outlets for films to be screened at, this becomes a problem, because majority of the films are only screened in the south, like in the capital, and maybe in Kumasi and some other places. We need to find a quick solution, and I'm glad that the NFA is embarking on an initiative to target just 1% of the Ghana's population to be going to the cinemas to watch films. And If that is indeed achieved, that would help. But then the question would be, what infrastructures can be put in place in terms of cinema? Digital will have its time, and so I'm sure all those things exist, but we need to have those cinema structures in place such that when a movie is released wherever in Ghana, it can be in as many cinemas across all 16 regions in Ghana. And I think one of the things we can do, which I hope the NFA is doing or all the stakeholders are trying to do, is to be able to convince government to incentivize, you know, investors who can go into putting up, cinemas to, be able to help with the industry, because without such, you can produce all the movies you want, but if you don't have the necessary outlets to show them in and recoup your investment, it's going to be quite difficult. And there may be times then where these things will dip. Now, a lot of people will shoot their movies and put it on the streaming platform, I mean, on a YouTube or any other streaming platform that is available, which is good. But I believe that the cinema going experience or factor is key even to the success of films on these streaming platforms, particularly when it's a hit and a lot of people are, the word of mouth keeps going. It then creates a lot of anticipation even before the film is dropped on whatever streaming platforms. And there have been studies to prove that. When you check a lot of films that are screened in the US or internationally, right after they are done and they go on whatever platform based on the studios that produce them, there is a surge of subscribers, even people subscribing and going to watch the film. So these are things that perhaps we need to take critical look at, that as we are on that spectrum of a revival for our industry, what can we do to sustain it, to keep the growth going? Because until we find a solution to that, after we've climbed to the apex, the next thing would be to fall down again. And that would be because perhaps we've not put in place the necessary structures. And I think this should be public-private partnerships involving government, involving uh, um, uh, companies, and all hands on board to get that work. Because Ghana's film industry shouldn't be at this state at all. We should have been on a level that is rubbing shoulders with Hollywood and all other places. Forget about even because we've been in the industry for quite long, because of the fact that we had the film, the Ghana film colony, which predates even independence. And it continued for a while until, other factors caused the industry to whittle down to the state that is being felt today. But I think regardless, we can still help build the industry and build it right. If we are seeing a growth, we need to quickly put in place all the necessary structures or factors to help it grow. And that has to be done quickly, because once we rise to the top and there are nothing to sustain that growth, even to keep it plateaued, the next step would be to come down. And that is something I wouldn't want to happen to the industry I find myself in. So I don't know about you, whatever your thoughts may be on this particular topic, kindly let me know what you think on this issue, particularly what Vicker did say with regards to Ghana's film industry being on a revival spectrum. Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section below. And this sums up my 3 stories for today's episode of the Film Mandate. But today being Monday, I would want to bring to you how some of the films that screened over the weekend performed in the box office worldwide. So starting with the North American box office from the Box Office Mojo, let's take a look at just the top 10 films. I'll still leave the link in the description below for you to take a look at the entire thing. But let's take a look at the top 10 films that performed this weekend in the North American box office. So starting with number 1, opening this very past weekend, One Battle After Another, the Paul Thomas Anderson film starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Tiana Taylor, and Benicio del Toro, and Sean Penn, and a host of many other characters. It debuted to $22.4 million. and that is at number one. At number two, we have Gabby's Dollhouse, the movie debuting at $13.7 million. At number three, dropping from number one, is the Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba, the movie Infinity Castle, making 7.1 million and a total domestic cum of $118,175,847. At number four, dropping from number three, is The Conjuring Last Rites, making $6,860,000. And the total, domestic total, is $161,454,110. And number five, we have The Strangers Chapter 2. We have The Strangers Chapter 2, and it has made $5.9 million. And number six, dropping from two, is him starring Marlon Wayans, which has made $3,650,000 and a total domestic of $20,793,925. And number seven, dropping from number five, is The Long Walk, and it has made $3.4 million. The Stephen King adapted film story, and the total is $28,814,237. At number eight, dropping from number four, is Downtown Abbey, the grand finale, which has made $3.3 million this weekend, and a total of $38,907,990. And number nine, we have the re-release of Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3. And that is a Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. That's Sam Raimi's directed Spider-Man trilogy starring Tobey Maguire. And it has made $2,250,977. The total domestic is not in yet. And at number 10, we have, dropping from six, it has made A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey, which is a Sony release picture, has made $1,250,000 and a total domestic of $5,922,586. So this sums up the 10 top highest grossing films over this particular weekend. So we'll be moving on from that to the worldwide box office receipts. Let's see whether there is any changes whatsoever in the top 10. Last week it remained so, and it looks like it has remained so for a while with no changes. Well, let's take a look at the top 10. And it looks like nothing has actually changed. So Neza 2 still occupies the first position. Lilo and Stitch follows after a Minecraft movie, and all has remained same from last week. So this indeed wraps up the entirety of the show, and this is where I bring to an end this episode of the Film Mandate. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Let me know what you think of all these stories I've covered in the new segment I've introduced called the Oscar Minute. Whatever your thoughts may be, I'll really appreciate it if you leave it in the comment section below, and whatever ideas you have in mind to help make this show much entertaining and fun, kindly drop it in the comment section below. So also soon, I've come to an end to this episode, and my name is Papa Otu, and thanks for joining me for this episode, and I'll come your way again with another exciting episode tomorrow. This has been the Film Mandate. I'll see you soon.